What's happening, guys? Sam Adams here, and welcome to a brand new episode of Caffeinate. Today, for March the 12th of 2019, my name is Samuel Adams, and welcome to today's show. Now, you might be saying, Sam, what's up with the brand new schedule for the show? You might have noticed, if you happen to be watching live, that the show is not at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday in the evenings. Instead, we're going to be switching back to the original schedule of Caffeinate, which is going to be at 7 a.m. every single weekday morning, and I'll change the background and all of that good stuff, finagle with the graphics and whatnot. Quite frankly, because my life is beginning to change more and I spend less time on content and on gaming and on my computers, and so to go ahead and do that in the morning and talk about the gaming news is a better way to, number one, bring you guys the best content as possible, because throughout the day I begin to lose steam. They call it getting tired, and by the time I get home my words slur together. It's not that good of a show. Yes, you get a much better show. And on top of that, it just seems to be that I'm better in the morning in general. You're more ready to go, rearing and ready. And of course, coffee always helps solve that. Hence the name of the show, Caffeinate. But aside from that, the show is staying the same, so you can expect it now at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, and that is the schedule that we will be going with for the foreseeable future. But with that being said, what are we going to be talking about on today's show? Over the weekend, an Oxford study came out, and it found that no significant link exists between violence and gaming. We'll talk more about that and what that means for politicians that have been using that as a foundation to scapegoat for many, many years. On top of that, Fortnite is set to introduce an undo purchase button, which is going to be great for parents of people between the ages of 8 and 12. The Fortnite dance lawsuits, speaking of Fortnite, have been dismissed after a new Supreme Court ruling. The Epic Games launcher has a search function now. We'll talk more about that and what that means. There is a brand new movie called Doom Annihilation, and it looks utterly abysmal. And on top of that, today we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of the World Wide Web. So we'll talk more about that and what that means for you. But again, if you are joining me live in the chat, I appreciate you being here, whether you're at school, whether you're at work. I hope you're getting caffeinated along with me. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. So to start off, we have our headline story for the day. Another study finds no significant links between violence and gaming. The researchers had predicted otherwise, but were shocked. A recent study into a hypothesized connection between violent video games and aggression has found no positive correlation between games and the behavior of the 1,004 team participants after multiple tests. Associate Professor Andrew of Oxford University, I skip his last name because it's like Przybylski. Przybylski? Sure. And senior lecturer Netta Weinstein of Cardiff University predicted that recent violent video game play is linearly and positively related to carer assessments of aggressive behavior. They had predicted that violence in video games were directly correlated. The results did not back this up at all, however, and also came up with no evidence that there is a critical tipping point where playing a game could actually cause aggression. The studio found that participants, 50% male and 50% female, and between the ages of 14 and 15, were moderately engaged in violent video games, spending an average of 2 hours playing them on a normal day. The study was survey-based, with teens and carers being asked questions regarding the games they play and their behavior after playing them. The screening questionnaire has been used widely to analyze psychosocial functioning of children ranging from 4 to 17 years old. Linear regression modeling was employed to look for links using data like trait-level aggression, gender, and time spent playing, but the results were not what the researchers expected. They, quote, did not support our prediction that there are statistically significant links relating violent gaming to adolescents' aggressive behavior, reads the study. Further testing came to the same conclusion. Equivalence testing, comparing the results with other literature on the subject, found that the observed effect relating violent gaming to aggressive behavior was both statistically and practically insignificant. Another regression model used by PEGI ratings. Age ratings were used to give game scores from 0 to 3 depending on how violent they were. With a violent game badge and an age rating of 18, for instance, a game would receive a score of 3. The ratings were then combined with how much time was spent playing. Again, nothing. Using ESRB ratings instead resulted in similar findings. And so they go on to say more, but essentially Oxford researchers have found no direct link, no direct correlation between violent video games and real-world acts of violence, which is something that has been known for years within the gaming community, because that's kind of like a thing that we definitely take the time to research a good bit on, but it's not something that has been widely adopted. And in my opinion, again, this is just my opinion, that is because video games are an incredible incredibly simple scapegoat. There's something that exists as a way to kind of pin the blame on whenever there is really no other reason behind something. So for instance, if there was a giant shooting somewhere, you might look first into the perpetrator's past and say, hey, did they play violent video games? If they played Call of Duty, you pin it on Call of Duty and say, hey, he played a ton of Modern Warfare 3 back in the day, so that is obviously the reason that he chose to take this route. Could it be? Probably not, because many people play Call of Duty and have no history of violence whatsoever. So again, this kind of research is what we need to see. This kind of research is incredibly useful, especially going forward as more and more of this kind of scapegoating has been going on over the past few years. But definitely something that I think we all kind of expected, but of course for researchers and for those that are not quite as into the lingo and into the environment as many gamers are, I suppose it was a shock, but it's something that's definitely good. And again, who would have thought that gaming and violence have no correlation? In fact, I would say, I would hypothesize in the same way. Again, if we're going off of having no kind of actual evidence whatsoever, which seems to be what many people have been going off of, that violence is actually, in gaming, a good way to blow off steam. So you might want to do some research and say, hey, are these people maybe even less violent? Again, I don't want to get too out there, but if we're just making claims without any kind of foundation, I mean, I suppose I can do that too. Not throwing shade or anything. But anyways, definitely an interesting finding from those at Oxford. But moving on to the next story of the day, Fortnite is set to introduce an undo purchase button within their game. Epic plans to allow Fortnite players to return a purchase made in the last 5 minutes, although it's not clear when. In a Reddit thread, which pointed out that, unlike Western versions, the Japanese version of Fortnite includes a confirm purchase button before payment goes through, Epic Vice President of Engineering Daniel Vogel explained the decision. Quote, "We neither want to add friction for players," he wrote, "nor do we want to benefit from accidental purchases or players regretting a purchase." While Fortnite already had a refund token system, many players have now used their tokens up, and accidental purchases can become an issue. As such, there is a new feature incoming. As an ongoing iteration, we are going to introduce an undo button to the store page that allows you to easily refund without using a token within a 5-minute time window, assuming that you haven't started a match since purchase. Vogel offers no timescale for the addition, however, so we don't exactly know when it will launch. He also explained why Japan is a special case, pointing out that on PS4 controllers, the 0 and X buttons, or O and X buttons, again, it's early, meanings are traditionally swapped, meaning accidental purchases could presumably be more common. And so, with this new feature incoming, I think that it's a fantastic idea, primarily because of the player base of Fortnite, which again, is wide and varied. You have people that are 5 playing it, you have people that are 55 playing it, and even further beyond that. But to be able to have an undo purchase button that does have a specific time frame on when you can undo the purchase is something that I think is not asking too much of the company, but also definitely catering to the individuals who say, hey, maybe I didn't want that. Because there are many times, especially in the digital kind of space, where I have purchased something and I'm like, man, I really wish I hadn't done that. Now, of course, can I go back and refund it? 9 times out of 10, you probably can't. But especially with something like a skin, that is something that is definitely going to be a pretty awesome feature, especially, as I said at the beginning of the show, for parents of kids who might be using credit cards to buy Fortnite skins, because as kids, you really have no kind of grasp of money and how it works and what the actual value of it is. And so if you spend $30 on Fortnite skins, then to be able to have a parent come in and say, why is this all of a sudden charged to my account, undo this, and actually have that ability, that's a pretty awesome feature that I think probably should have been included from the very beginning, and at least should be added to not only Fortnite, but other games of a similar nature, especially those that do tend to have a younger player base. Again, between the ages of, I would say, even as young as 5, probably. Maybe that's not healthy, but again, very young to probably around the teenage years or so. I know that my parents probably wish that I had had that growing up. But with that being said, if you did want to undo your purchases in Fortnite, guess what? You can start doing that at some point in the near future. Now, speaking of Fortnite, the dance lawsuits, which we have been talking about for the better part of the past couple of months, have officially been dismissed after a new Supreme Court ruling. However, not permanently dismissed, according to many of those filing claims. The creators will have to wait for copyrights on their dances for the suits to move forward, which again, not sure how that works. But I'll continue. Law firm Pierce Brainridge has dismissed 5 of its copyright lawsuits against Epic Games over dances in Fortnite, it announced via a news release. The decision to dismiss the suits comes as a result of the Supreme Court's decision last week in Fourth Estate Public Benefit Corp. versus WallStreet.com, which changes the traditional understanding of process of copyright suits. Previously, plaintiffs could file copyright infringement lawsuits as soon as they applied for registration with the Copyright Office. Now, plaintiffs have to wait for the Copyright Office to act on that application before filing suit, which, as a result of its backlog, can sometimes take many months, Pierce Brainridge said in its statement about the lawsuits. Because the suits were originally filed immediately after the plaintiffs applied for copyrights on the dances, all have been dismissed for the time being. If the law firm's plaintiffs, which include Alfonso Ribeiro, Orange Shirt Kid, Terrence 2 Millie Ferguson, James Baker, and Russell Horning, receive copyright of these dances from the U.S. Copyright Office, then the suits will be refiled. There is no guarantee that the U.S. Copyright Office will actually approve the registrations, however. The process for copywriting dance moves in the U.S. is extremely murky. According to U.S. law, you can't actually copyright a dance move, only fully choreographed routines. The difficulty is that there's really nothing to say what the dividing line is between the two. While some of the filings may qualify as choreographed routines, others might not. It's up for the Copyright Office to decide how this affects Fortnite and its popular dance emotes going forward. And so, we have what appears to be at least a temporary conclusion to the lawsuits that have been going on within the Fortnite community. Of course, as I mentioned, we've been talking about this for the better part of, I would say, the past 4 to 5 months, something along those lines. It's one of those long-standing, recurring topics that we've had here on the show. But without a doubt, I think this is probably something that has no ground to stand on because of the fact that, again, this is not a giant choreographed routine. You cannot simply copyright the Carlton because it's only a dance that can technically last less than 2 seconds. It's just not something that can be done. Now, again, these people are genuinely trying their hardest to get money out of Epic Games. And I mean, again, as I've said on many shows in the past, if I was put into the position of being able to potentially get a little bit of that sweet, sweet Fortnite money, I'd probably go in for it too. I'm not even going to lie about that. Even if I had no ground to stand on, it's still worth diving in and saying, hey, is it possible? Can I actually do this? So, with that being said, it's definitely something to keep an eye on, and I will let you guys know if they do refile these claims, but at the same time, the suits just have no kind of foundation to them. I just don't see this actually going anywhere. It doesn't make sense to me to see this become something that actually is a success for those trying to get some money out of Epic Games. But I suppose we'll see what happens. However, this is what appears to be the at least temporary end of the Fortnite dance lawsuits. However, Epic Games is doing some fantastic things, specifically with the Epic Games launcher, and today we have had confirmation, or at least a couple of days ago, we had confirmation that the Epic Games launcher now has a search function. And again, it's pretty much a basic, headline story, but we'll still continue to read it. The Epic Games launcher store has a search function now. This may seem like the kind of thing you'd expect to have right from the start, but as Sergey Galyokin explained on Twitter, quote, "We launched with 3 games. There was no need to enable search. Now there are slightly more than 3 games on the Epic launcher, though still not as many as its competitors, of course, and so it has a search function. Once we have more games, we'll add more features, including pages, as right now the store is set to infinite scroll. There are quite a few other features that, of course, Epic should add as the time does go on, but this is just yet another fantastic addition to the Epic Games launcher. Now, you might be saying, as the article does say, shouldn't this be something that is included from day one, regardless of the amount of games on the site or on the platform? Probably. That's something that should have been added. But as time has gone on and as Epic Games has continued to grow and as the Epic Games launcher has become something of a viable resource and a viable source for people's gaming habits, I think that these kind of additions are kind of more expected, and it's definitely something that is beginning to grow and learn as time goes on. Now, again, as we talked about a couple of months back, can the Epic Games launcher actually become a genuine Steam competitor? And that is still yet to be seen. That's still up in the air because, again, a much better deal exists for developers and publishers who want to come to Epic Games as compared to Steam. But at the same time, is it still going to be viable in 5 to 10 years down the line? Is the Fortnite hype going to be enough to allow Epic Games to get their launcher off the ground in time for it to maintain any kind of dominance within the PC gaming community? Now, with that being said, tons of games have been given away for free. You've been seeing a lot of people adopt Epic Games Launcher from a very early time frame as compared to stuff like Steam, which is such a long-standing icon in the PC gaming space that to outdo it is going to take quite a bit of doing. But with that being said, it seems like it's on a good path right now. Again, the search function is just the newest in a slew of additions that have come to the launcher over the past few months. So if you want to dive in and give it a shot, again, the launcher is free. Many free games have been given out over the course of the past few months, with a couple free right now. I know the Axiom Verge is the last one that I'm aware of, but I think Subnautica has been free. There are a couple on there, so you can dive on and give it a shot. But I do believe that it does have some potential, as does Androvsky in the chat. He says, I can't see it competing over a long period of time. It definitely depends on how the overall launcher evolves and what the adoption is. And this is the last thing that I'll say on it. Every launcher and every platform is directly dependent on the quality of the games that are on that specific platform. For instance, and you can look at this from a very large scale, Xbox One is, at its core, the most popular, or not the most popular, excuse me, let's back up, that's an incorrect claim. It is the most powerful console on the market right now if you do have an Xbox One X. And so on paper, that would make it, hypothetically, the go-to console for people that are looking to get into gaming on the cheap whenever you're just getting into consoles. And so, with that being taken into account, Xbox One X still isn't nearly as popular as PS4 or PS4 Pro because the games that are on PS4 are exclusive to the PlayStation 4 and are in general better than the, exclusives that are available on the Xbox One, which are, quite honest with you, number one, few, and number two, unimpressive as compared to stuff like Uncharted, as compared to stuff like God of War, Spider-Man, etc. And so with that being said, a pretty good way to explain that Epic Games Launcher is, of course, something that has potential, but it all depends on how the adoption of it goes. But I digress. We'll move on to this awful Doom movie that's going to be coming up pretty soon. So Doom Annihilation has a brand new trailer that teases a pretty bland movie, and it's a reboot, which makes it all the more awful. After the critical and commercial flop of the original Doom movie in 2005, many fans of the early 90s first-person shooter game agreed the Doom universe was probably best left as that, a game. But if Hollywood is good for anything, it's bleeding a once popular franchise dry, and with the game series' recent revival, someone somewhere decided we needed a movie reboot. Now, the trailer for Doom Annihilation has dropped, and it is a bit, as they say on Engadget, meh. Written and directed by Tony Giglio, the movie follows a group of space marines responding to a distress call from a Martian moon base. The same basic premise as the original movie, so don't feel like you need to watch the first one to get caught up. Evidently, things go south real quick, and soon all of humanity is threatened by a bunch of demonic creatures. The movie is not slated for a cinematic release. It could easily end up on Netflix, though, given that the streaming giant's propensity is snapping up difficult titles left and right and center. And obviously, producers don't want to give away the best bits in the trailer, which has to be age appropriate. But if the brief trailer is anything to go by, the movie could be missing iconic Doom baddies such as the Hell Knights and the Cacodemon. Cacodemon? The giant floating one, I think, is what that one is. This won't sit well with classic Doom fans or anyone involved in the game, as evidenced by the tweet below. Still, its apocalyptic thriller premise might be enough to attract new fans to the franchise, and who knows, maybe there will be a proper sequel on the cards if there is money to be had in it. And so again, they conclude the article by posting the official tweet from the verified Doom Twitter account that says, "We are not involved with the movie." So, if you have the main Twitter account for Doom disowning this movie, is it going to be the best one out there? Probably not. With that being said, again, you have to consider that it's not going to be a full theatrical release or a full theater release, whatever the correct terminology is. You are going to be paying an arm and a leg to go sit in IMAX 3D and watch this. To be quite honest with you, if you take a Doom movie at face value, or in general any bad video game movie at face value, and you look past the fact that it's probably not going to be the best looking, the acting's probably going to be subpar, if you take all of those things and you just acknowledge them without focusing on them, a movie can still be a good time regardless of its actual quality in terms of its cinematic, professionalism, etc., etc. You can still have a good time with a bad movie in the same way that you can have a good time with a bad game. It just is something that you have to look past and say, hey, what is in here that I do like? And if it is included with a Netflix subscription, a Hulu subscription, whatever it might be, then that's all the more reason just to give it a shot on a lonesome Friday night. And you're like, hey, let's watch Doom Annihilation. I heard it's bad. That's something I've done a good bit in the past. But if you did want to take a look at the movie, again, it should be coming out some point soon. Again, marked for a 2019 release. But we'll see what happens with this one and if it is going to actually end up on Netflix. But again, my hopes are not high. My hopes are not high. But Universal, though. If Universal's getting in on it, that sounds pretty interesting. Again, this looks like something I would get from Dollar Tree. Oh god, it looks bad. Moving on before my eyes begin to bleed. The final story of the day is a short but sweet one. Today marks the 30th anniversary of the World Wide Web. And of course, Google has made a doodle to celebrate it if you did want to go onto google.com. And so today's Google Doodle celebrates the 30th anniversary of the creation of the World Wide Web, first proposed on March 11th, 1989 by Tim Berners-Lee. While today we use the words internet and web interchangeably, they actually refer to different things. The internet is the global network of computers that are able to communicate with one another and dates back to the US military's ARPANET developed in the 1960s. The web, meanwhile, is the public's main way of accessing this network and was proposed by Berners-Lee in the late 80s. The technology is complex, but Tim Berners-Lee's genius was in creating a streamlined system that would allow people to easily navigate this network. The web is a complex series of URLs linked by HTTP and formatted in HTML, but its abstract design makes it as simple to access as a series of interlinked web pages. The simplicity of this system was what allowed the general public, not just scientists and engineers, to make use of this vast, complex network. Today's doodle, of course, depicts a charmingly optimistic vision of the web, which has since been crushed by the amount of hate speech and the amount of trash out here we've ruined it. No, I'm just kidding. The internet, as a conclusive statement, is absolutely incredible and is, I would say, one of the most impressive inventions of all time. Of course, you have stuff like the wheel, which is much more foundational to human existence and whatnot in today's day and age. But whenever you look at the internet and think about the potential of it, think about what it's been able to do in just 30 years, the evolution of the internet has been incredible. Literally, I am talking to you via a camera that is connected to a computer, and you are miles and miles and miles away, sometimes hundreds of miles, across continents. And we are able to have a conversation that has little to no latency depending on where you're actually watching it at. Of course, the fact that you can record stuff and upload it, the fact that I have 5 years of video content that's out there for you to enjoy, this just basic idea, this simple use of the internet is something that blows my mind even today. The fact that it's even possible, that it's something that can be done. And Tim Berners-Lee is the man that made that possible for us little non-military civilians. If you are a big fan of the World Wide Web, join me in celebrating the 30th anniversary of one of the most impressive tools in modern day. Also one of the most dangerous, but let's not get too philosophical. Anyways, that wraps up today's episode of Caffeinate. If you did enjoy today's show, be sure to drop me a like down below if you are watching the YouTube version. And for those joining me live in the chat, I appreciate you guys being here for a randomly timed episode of Caffeinate. I've got some stuff to do later on tonight, but I did want to go ahead and get in today's show because, hey, we've got to change the schedule, and so some concessions have to be made. But with that being said, again, the show is going to be rescheduled Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, so I will be back here tomorrow morning for a brand new episode of Caffeinate. But until then, you guys have a fantastic rest of the day. I appreciate you very much. And also, before I go, thank you so much for those people that reached out and said happy birthday via Twitter or another route. I appreciate the love, and I appreciate being able to have not only family and friends in real life, but also in general people on the internet that care about me and that wish me well. But yeah, 22 years old. I feel old, but I'm still young. Peace.